Florida hit by tornadoes and Hurricane Milton. Ukraine's president presses for support from southeastern European leaders. And a medical incident at the Eastern Hospital, the patient now in stable condition. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Hurricane Milton made landfall Wednesday along Florida's Gulf Coast as a Category 3 storm. Milton brought powerful winds of 205 kilometers per hour, heavy rain, and storm surges that caused flooding in some coastal areas. By Wednesday evening, more than 130 tornado warnings associated with Milton have been issued by the National Weather Services. Milton was downgraded to a Category 1 storm as it moved through Florida early Thursday. Deaths have been reported, but authorities have not said how many have died due to the severe weather. Tracy Furness has more.
Powerful tornadoes wreaked havoc across Florida hours before Hurricane Milton made landfall, overturning vehicles and ripping off roofs. Around 125 homes were destroyed. The Spanish Lakes Country Club near Fort Pierce on Florida's Atlantic coast was hit particularly hard, with some residents killed.
This wasn't expected. We prepare for things, but you can't expect or do anything when we have multiple tornadoes touch down in such a short period of time in our community. It's devastating. There's no words could describe it.
When Hurricane Milton finally made it to shore Wednesday night, maximum sustained winds were 205 kilometers per hour. It roared ashore in Siesta Keys, Florida at 8:30 p.m. and brought with it deadly storm surge to much of the Florida Gulf Coast, including densely populated areas such as Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota and Fort Myers, home to around 3.3 million people. The wind was too much for the home of baseball's Tampa Bay Rays in St. Petersburg as the fabric roof was ripped to shreds. It was not immediately clear if there was damage inside Tropicana Field Stadium, but lights were seen on inside the building. The stadium was not being used as a storm shelter, but as a staging site for workers who were brought to the area to deal with the storm's aftermath, according to the Tampa Bay Times. The Associated Press's Kate Payne, staying in this Tampa hotel, describes the storm after landfall.
I can still feel the impacts of the storm, the rain pounding against the windows, trees whipping around in the wind. Some of the streets in downtown have standing water covering them, and you can see the wind just racing across those pools of water.
Milton weakened to a Category 1 storm as it moved through Florida early Thursday. Power outages were widespread and deaths have been reported from severe weather. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The captain of a Turkish Airlines plane died mid-flight, forcing the co-pilot to make an emergency landing in New York City on Wednesday. The cause of the pilot's death is still under investigation. The Istanbul-bound Airbus A350 plane took off from Seattle on Tuesday. According to an airline spokesperson, the captain Ochin Pelivan lost consciousness when flying over northern Canada. The co-pilot took over the controls while crew members attempted to revive the captain. The co-pilot decided to make an emergency landing, but the captain died before the plane landed at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. The Turkish Airlines grieved the loss of the 59-year-old captain and expressed condolences to his family. Speaking at a summit with southeastern European leaders in Croatia, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he intends to present Kyiv's victory plan for defeating invading Russian forces to Western leaders this week. However, a weekend meeting to discuss it has been postponed as U.S. President Joe Biden said he had to stay home to respond to Hurricane Milton's landfall in Florida. Daniel Rao tells us more.
Speaking at a summit in Croatia, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he hopes his meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden at the American Ramstein airbase in Germany, originally set for Saturday, will be rescheduled soon. That meeting was meant to include about 20 Western leaders and defense ministers. Zelensky said Kyiv will present its victory plan there. The Ukrainian president added he now planned to meet with the leaders of Britain, France, Italy and Germany this week to present the plan. Zelensky said the plan is about strengthening Ukraine both geopolitically and on the battlefield before any kind of dialogue with Russia.
The first point of the plan focuses on whether the deficit of geopolitical certainty in Europe will be resolved. Does Ukraine have a place in NATO? If yes, and this is properly confirmed, Putin will lose geopolitically. Russia must accept that Europe has borders, independent nations, and each nation has the right to choose its future.
The specifics of Zelensky's blueprint have been kept quiet. However, contours of the plan have emerged, including the need for fast action on decisions Western allies have been mulling since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. Kyiv is still awaiting word from Western partners on its repeated requests to use the long-range weapons they provide to hit targets on Russian soil. At the summit in Croatia, the participants passed a declaration condemning Russia's aggression against Ukraine and supporting Zelensky's peace efforts, Ukraine's membership in NATO and its reconstruction after the war. On Wednesday, Zelensky signed an agreement with Croatia on further cooperation, particularly regarding humanitarian aid, demining and war crimes prosecution experience that Croatia has from its own 1991 to 1995 war. Daniel, TV News.
Back locally, a medical incident at Pamela Yude Nethersole Eastern Hospital. A nasogastric tube was wrongly inserted into a bronchus of a 76-year-old patient after a medical intern misjudged the tube's position. The patient is now in a stable condition. Milton reports.
The male patient was supposed to have a colonoscopy at the Eastern Hospital on Wednesday. Since the patient has swallowing problems, a nurse inserted a nasogastric tube into the man's stomach, feeding him with a solution for bowel cleansing before the colonoscopy procedure. Because the nurse could not identify the position of the tube, the patient had to undergo an X-ray examination. The result of the X-ray was examined by a medical intern who said the tube was correctly placed. The man began receiving the bowel cleansing solution via the tube. However, the patient did not feel well after an hour, with symptoms such as stomachache, a decrease in oxygen saturation, and shortness of breath. Another doctor inspected the situation and found out that the medical intern had mistakenly assessed the tube's position. It was inserted into a bronchus. The man was transferred to an intensive care unit. He is currently conscious. Speaking to reporters, the hospital management said the incident may have caused by the medical intern's lack of clinical experience. So Gi-yang, chief executive of the hospital, said they will strengthen the relevant training for medical interns. Meanwhile, she said an investigation team will be set up to follow up on the incident. In June, another medical incident happened at Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which also involved a medical intern. The incident happened during the replacement of a new nasogastric tube for a 61-year-old patient. It was discovered 2 days later that the tube had been inserted into the man's lungs. The patient remained in critical condition until August. News 9, TVB News.
The police say they welcomed the sentencing of former children's residential home employees who were largely convicted of child abuse. The police have urged the public to contact them if they suspect any incidents of child abuse. Milton reports.
In 2021, former employees of the children's residential home were arrested on suspicion of child abuse. The police prosecuted 34 of them. On Monday, the last group of defendants in the case received their sentences. In a joint press conference on Thursday, the Police and Justice Department said officers had watched more than 60,000 hours of CCTV footage during their investigation. They found 400 instances of abuse. The police said it was difficult for officers to identify the abuse because the incidents often took place quickly. In 2022, justice authorities established a task force for the case. The investigation process was completed within 6 months. Among the 34 prosecuted defendants, 33 were found guilty. There were 880 child abuse cases recorded in the city in the first 7 months of the year. More than 80% of the abusers were carers. The police said anyone who suspects an instance of child abuse should contact the force. News 9, TVB News.
And still ahead, Premier Li Qiang and ASEAN leaders confirmed their commitment to upgrading the Free Trade Pact. China to resume importing Australian lobsters by the end of the year. And phase 2 of a free eye examination program for public housing tenants. Welcome back. Premier Li Qiang and leaders of the Association of Southeast Nations confirmed their commitment to upgrading their free trade pact. Li said China is eager to spur more substantive cooperation with ASEAN in various fields. Danny Zhou has a story.
The ASEAN Plus 3 summit was the highlight of the day. Leaders from 10 member states of the bloc, as well as China, Japan and South Korea, gathered in Vientiane for discussions about regional economic cooperation. In his address, Premier Li Qiang warned regional development is faced with uncertainty and urged countries to be mindful of external interference. Li noted the external forces have attempted to bring bloc confrontation and geopolitical conflict into the region. He said Asian affairs should be handled through consultation among countries in the continent, and Asia's fate must be in its own hands. Li stressed China is ready to work with fellow Asian countries to uphold the Asian consciousness and work towards peace, common prosperity and interconnectivity. Earlier in the day, Premier Li was present at the 27th ASEAN-China summit. He urged the bloc to strengthen cooperation with China as the world is faced with sagging economic recovery and the rise of protectionism. He underscored the markets are the most prominent strength of China and ASEAN, and they are still expanding and diversifying. He announced an upgraded ASEAN-China free trade agreement was almost complete and reaffirmed his commitment to backing multilateralism and free trade. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
China will resume importing Australian live lobsters by the end of the year. This after Premier Li Qiang agreed a deal with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese when they met on the sidelines of the regional summit in Vientiane. The lobster ban is the last in a series of trade barriers between the two countries to be lifted. It's been costing Australian exporters more than $13 billion a year, and Beijing banned a range of items including coal, wine and beef after arguments over COVID 4 years ago. Relations between China and Australia have improved since Albanese's centre-left government took office in 2022.
The Premier pointed out the quite considerable growth that has occurred in Australian exports, including wine and barley, that has grown to be larger than what was there before there were impediments to that trade. I'm pleased to announce that Premier Li and I have agreed on a timetable to resume full lobster trade by the end of this year. This, of course, will be in time for Chinese New Year.
Today is World Sight Day. The Department of Ophthalmology of the University of Hong Kong and Orbis have launched a second phase of their free eye screening services for public housing residents.
The first phase of their free eye examination services began in June last year and ended in September this year. Comprehensive eye checkups were provided to public housing tenants aged 50 or above in Southern District, Kwun Tong and Tai Po. More than 3,200 residents took part in the program. About 700 of them were diagnosed with vision problems and referred to specialist clinics for follow-up treatment. Nearly half of them were also found to have glaucoma, which is the #1 eye disease that could lead to blindness in Hong Kong. Around 30% suffer from cataracts. Ms. Lai, who's in her 60s, found out she has cataracts, macular degeneration, and branch retinal vein occlusion, also known as eye stroke, through the program. Ms. Law said she was so scared when doctors told her about the blockages in the blood vessel in her eyes, with blood already oozing out. After the diagnosis, she even saw people's faces turn dark because of macular degeneration. With timely referral and treatment, her condition has stabilized. The Department of Ophthalmology of the University of Hong Kong and Orbis announced on World Sight Day the launch of the second phase of the eye examination program. There will be 1,000 free spots for public rental housing residents aged 50 or above across Hong Kong, with glaucoma screenings as one of the program's focuses. They will further expand the service as needed.
Doctors suggested citizens around 40 to 50 years old should undergo eye examinations every year. For high-risk groups, including those with high myopia and high eye pressure, they are recommended to undertake even more comprehensive eye examinations every year to prevent irreversible vision loss.
A lot of these patients actually are not aware of the disease. The symptoms are very subtle. It is so critical for us to identify the disease early because we have means, we have treatments to provide for patients to prevent deterioration of the optic nerve.
South Korean author Han Kang has won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Literature. This was announced today in Stockholm by the Nobel Committee at the Swedish Academy. Han won the coveted prize for her intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life. The prize carries a cash award of 11 million Swedish kroner from a bequest left by the award creator, Swedish inventor Alfred Nobel. The laureates are invited to receive their awards at ceremonies on December 10th, the anniversary of Nobel's death. The Nobel Peace Prize will be announced Friday and the Economics Award on October 14th. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.